Serious. What's the scariest thing you lived through? Attention. Serious. Tag notice. Jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. When a volcano erupted, I was climbing towards it. After roughly 20 minutes and many kilometers of frenzied running, I should have been okay, but I'm from Saskatchewan, and we don't have volcanoes, so I had no idea. Added bonus, I'd had a mastectomy 4 weeks prior and wasn't supposed to do any exercise for another 2. On the lava rocks, I collapsed and ate shit. When it erupted on West Manager, someone just saw that red sky and smoke from distance and called the fire brigade, thinking it was a wildfire. It was lava. After evacuating the island, they started to just cool down the lava with hoses to prevent it from damaging the town, so that people could return after the eruption. The volcano was believed to be dead and permanently safe. I was on a public transit bus to go to high school one morning. I usually walked, but it was so cold that day, so I'm on a bus, alone. It's like 6 a.m. and still dark because of winter. Dude gets on the bus. He could sit anywhere he wanted. He sits right behind me. He grabs my hair and sniffs it with this nasty sounding inhale. Keep in mind I'm 15. And I just hop off the bus and speed walk to my school. He got off and followed me. For this 2 to 3 minutes of walking I kept thinking of what my family would think if I went missing. I got to school safely, but yeah, I still think about that sometimes. My dad used to drink a lot when I was a child, I guess around 5 years. Once my mom, after many insults, started to cry and scream, "Break the dishes." It was a hysteric. And, of course, I was crying too. It lasted for about an hour. I had never been that scared before. Luckily, now everything is okay. My dad doesn't drink anymore. I love both of my parents. Hurricane Sandy. I was at the Jersey Shore heading back, evacuating, to my regular home or inland. While we were driving back we were in the middle of the worst parts of the hurricane. Power lines were down, debris were everywhere, and water was washed up on the streets. And the winds, oh the winds, the wind must have been blowing 50 miles per hour. Shit gets fucking scary. Me and my family got back home safely. That was a wild storm. I remember going to the Barnes & Noble's 2 towns over with my mom so we could charge our devices, and it took like 2 hours going from store to store looking for batteries for our radio. It felt so good when the power came on and I realized I had been taking electricity for granted. During my high school years 1999 to 2002, my class experienced 8 student deaths, car wrecks, cancer, suicide, Columbine and 9/11. No extra counseling from our school. We literally went to back-to-back funerals, then sat through a full day of school the very next day. 2 kids were killed in the same accident. I'm 37 and still haven't recovered. That kind of reminds me of a similar story about my own high school. Nothing at that level, but we had the popular girl in my year level lose her mother in an incident that was a real tragedy and got a lot of press in the city and greater area. About a month later, we had to sit through a driver's ed assembly and the cops presenting it decided to use that case as an example, and then when the girl ran out crying, they kept drawing attention to her. Worst thing was that some teachers tried to tell the hosts to talk about a different case, but the ones who were organizing the assembly overruled them because they thought it would impact us more. Needless to say, all the kids in my year were pretty pissed at the school for that. my mother's mental illness and delusions when I was a kid. I remember one time when she made me and my sister sleep in bed with her because she saw demons hovering around our bedroom window, trying to get in. I woke up to find her staring down at me and my sister with the butcher knife in her hand. She was smiling, but there were tears running down her face. I just closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. Stuff like that, for years of our childhood. When she finally abandoned us, I felt so much guilt at how relieved and happy I felt that she was gone. I went through similar shit with both parents, thankfully at different times. My dad has schizoaffective disorder, and like myself, my mom had bipolar disorder. I know how hard it is, and I hope you are doing well now. Also, please don't feel guilty about being relieved about your mother taking off and abandoning you. She did you a huge favor there. Domestic abuse and gun violence. My ex was on meth and he would get high and go on rampages, and I was usually the only person around. One night I was sitting on the couch and he pointed a gun at me and said I could kill you right now. Then he pointed it at the wall and shot the gun. I had no cell phone, no car, and it was winter. I was stuck and he sat there with the gun the whole night. He kept it on his lap while he played video games and I was expected to sit quietly and watch. I've been away from him for almost 8 years now and I'm happy and safe. I've got a wonderful fiancé and I've not spoken to said ex for those 8 years. These are the things that people like me only see on television and movies. We all know it happens, but we don't all experience it. So, it feels distant, and sometimes it's so barbaric, it can be hard to accept as something people actually go through. I'm sorry this happened to you, and thanks for being brave enough to share this. It brings the experience closer to reality for those of us who can't grasp it fully. The world is full of real monsters. In the last week I lived with my father. I was 90% sure he would kill my mother, my sister and I at any night with his gun. At Christmas on 2017 he put a hose in his mouth and the other part in the exhaust pipe of his car. No, he didn't try to kill himself, but draw attention. When my mother saw him, she knew it was the last straw and we had to leave the house immediately. The cops arrived 1 hour later and my father was really drunk. I couldn't sleep that night cause in the hurry I had to leave my cat with him. I cried all night feeling so guilt for leaving him. The next day we went back with people to help us and thanks God, my cat was okay. Now he lives with us and I never been happier in my life. My mother divorced him and my sister and I live with her. The last week I spoke to my mother and confessed her I was sure my father would had killed us if we stayed 1 week more. My mother confessed she was sure he would had killed us if we stayed even less than a week. We also had a lockdown during college because there was a hostage situation at a restaurant downtown. The college buildings are spread out all over the city, so they just decided to keep us all inside just in case. It's weird, I was way more rattled about it than about being on lockdown in high school with the gunmen wandering the neighborhood. On a flight with my husband and 3-month-old daughter, our plane suddenly had to be diverted to a nearby airport. Even though our destination was only about 30 minutes away, the flight attendants came around to teach us the brace for impact position. I had a special one for bracing for impact with the baby. People were quietly panicking and praying. My husband's anxiety was through the roof, and I just accepted that this might be how we go. Once we landed, we saw that an entire fleet of ambulances was waiting for us. The guy in front of us just turned and said, "Well, that's reassuring." There was a lot of speculation once we got off the plane, but I never found out what had happened. I used to fly a lot with work, and any deviation from the norm and things go a bit weird in there. I think it's the lack of oxygen. Some guy goes a bit nuts and has to be tackled. Pandemonium. A guy has a heart attack and has to have a flight diverted. People weeping throughout the plane. The scariest thing for me was when the oxygen masks came down once. I've seen the video showing that it's an easy thing to do, but panic had set in and people were running around like in airplane. The movie edit replaced the word exercise with oxygen. I will blame my phone for that, and my own laziness for not checking. My father is pedophile and, probably, a sociopath. He molested, raped my older sister who is now dead, in part because of that trauma. In 2004 he and my mom adopted my sister from China and he touched her from at least age 3. My mom finally got the guts to go to the cops in 2008. She had known since the late 90s what was going on but was terrified of my father who repeatedly told her he would kill her and no one else would love her. After he went to prison our lives just fell apart. My mom was addicted to Valium and just wasn't there for us. One time in high school we had to go on lockdown because there was a gunman in the neighborhood around the school. This was in Florida, and the school was open-walled, I guess you'd say. So like instead of all the classrooms being inside a building that had several doors to the outside, all the classrooms just led to an open hallway. Anyone could just walk right into the school at any point. So that was exciting. We were in one of the only classrooms that didn't have a window, and there was no window in the door either, but there were doors to the 2 surrounding classrooms. So I'd if we were better or worse off than other classrooms if the shooter actually decided to come on campus. One other negative is this happened like right after A or B period lunch. So the kids who had C period lunch never got to eat because they kept us on lockdown until the end of the school day. One positive is we were in the computer lab so we just got to dick around online to take our minds off possibly dying. We also had a lockdown during college because there was a hostage situation at a restaurant downtown. The college buildings are spread out all over the city, so they just decided to keep us all inside just in case. It's weird. I was way more rattled about it than about being on lockdown in high school with the gunmen wandering the neighborhood. Typhoons in the Philippines. I could see rooftops blown away easily. One almost hit my apartment, but a light pole luckily was in the way to block it. The next morning, a ton of debris were in all walkways of my apartment and we couldn't leave our campus. Water and electricity were out for more than a week. Thank goodness my brother and I had personal lanterns we had brought from America. One day my mom called me telling me, "The cops are surrounding your dad's house. He's outside in cuffs covered in blood. Are stepmom and the kids okay?" And I went into a panic. I drove like a madman. My stepmom met me at the home and my siblings were luckily at school. My dad had beat my uncle to a pulp and shot him. He's alive, praise goodness. Crime scene wouldn't clean until we cleaned personal belongings, fridge, deep freeze, etc. So I took it upon myself to help my stepmom. When we walked in the house it was like a horror film, from the kitchen, to the bathroom, to the bloody handprints led down the door. Some of it wasn't dried after the 8 hours we sat outside. Some things were left behind like a bloody splinted chair leg. I ended up miscarrying the next day. It absolutely ruined me. Worse off, my dad I've feared most of my life may get off easy on these charges even as a known felon and repeat offender due to some circumstances. Special needs uncle can't recall the story, and uncle was on meth at the time of attack. Dad was just drunk as usual. However, spent years saying he'd kill him if he got the chance as he hated how slow he was. Hold on, let me get out some stories because my personal stuff never gets read anyway. Ready? Okay, 2 instances. I was around 10, lived with my dad, who was an alcoholic with about every mental disorder there is. He was pretty much a ghost in the house. No parental responsibilities towards me whatsoever. So my grandpa had to come and take care of me, including money management for rent and food. My dad has resentment towards my grandpa because of his troubled childhood. One night I wake up at around midnight and I hear a bunch of tumbling around. My dad is a big tall dude whose steps you can feel as he walks around. He came in drunk and he asked my grandpa for money to fix the car, aka keep on drinking, or taking drugs, or hoeing around, who knows. Grandpa wouldn't give him money. My dad escalated, grabbed him by the neck and dragged him from his room to the living room. My room was in between so I heard it all, where he started beating the shit out of him, and my grandpa was screaming my name. This was a small apartment. I peeked out through my door to watch as my dad screamed to my grandpa, "Be thankful I don't kill you now, bitch." When my grandpa stopped responding, He walked towards my grandpa's room, trashed it around looking for money. As that was happening, I quickly changed into my school uniform, took the notebooks out of my backpack, put in all the money and snacks I had, the equivalent of $8, and scared shitless I went back in bed, waiting for my dad to leave. But I knew I was next. I hear my dad coming towards me. He punches open the room. "Dad? And you?" "Me, yes, Dad." "Don't act like you didn't hear anything. I just want you to know that I love you. I'm leaving now. Take care of your grandpa." He left. I counted 12 minutes on the clock after he left to make sure he wasn't coming back. I tried to call my aunt from my grandpa's phone, but they didn't pick up. There was a huge puddle of blood in the floor and he was unresponsive, but I wasn't sticking around. I grabbed my backpack and I went couch surfing. My best friend at the time, he passed away less than a year later from leukemia, let me stay with him. He was 22. I was 10. I ended up going back to school like a week later because I ran out of money and I didn't know where to go. The story continues. In another instance before this happened, like a month or so, I frankly don't remember, my dad got a psychotic attack and I was alone with him. He thought his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend was coming to kill him. He grabbed a kitchen knife. He held the front door with his body shut as if someone was going to come in, and he ordered me to yell outside through the window and to jump out of the window. We lived in the 4th floor. If the dude came in, yeah, I totally have daddy issues. These two are the scariest, and I've been through very scary shit. Attempts of kidnap, rape with metal objects, having mafias threaten to kill me also thanks to my dad, etc. Nothing scares me as much as my angry father, but I guess he can't pull that shit on me again if he wanted. I grew up, I take no shit anymore. The day he's on his deathbed I will pour myself the finest bottle of champagne there is. Waiting to find out whether or not my two best friends survived two separate near-death experiences. One was supposed to be at the Pulse nightclub the night of the shooting but cancelled his plans at the last moment. I woke up to headlines about the shooting on my phone the next morning. The other was rescued from a suicide attempt and there was about 4 hours between her being taken to the hospital and stabilized. Just waiting for hours, sitting by my phone waiting for any news, was agony. I've lived through some traumatizing stuff, having a history of childhood sexual abuse, and nothing was worse than the span of time where I thought I'd lost my system of unconditional love and support. I came seconds away from drowning in the ocean. I was swimming at the beach and wanted to swim out further than the furthest person in the swimming area. I was super close and doing great when suddenly a massive wave came out of nowhere and crashed right on my head, pushing me under. I didn't know which way was up or down. By the time I surfaced, another huge wave crashed down on my head before I could take a breath and I was pushed back under, this time spinning around and I had even less clue of where the surface was. I was panicking and trying to find my way up. My chest was screaming and felt like it was going to explode. I felt my subconscious telling me to take a breath and I was frantically telling myself not to do that and hold on just a second more. I was just about to suck in water and drown when I was washed up on shore where I could stand again. I took a breath and started hacking with water pouring out of my nose. I stumbled and collapsed in the sand for a few moments and then dragged myself back to my hotel. None of my family or any lifeguards noticed that I had almost died. I met up with some of my family as I was stumbling across the sand and all I could say is I'm done, and keep on going to the hotel. So the ride had a narrow raft that had 3 seats in a single row. I remember sitting on the back of the raft and looking for a seatbelt or safety harness only to find out the only thing strapping you in was a Velcro strap that went over one shoulder. That was it. And as soon as we went down this first drop the Velcro strap instantly came undone and I started to feel myself lift out of my seat. Horrified it felt as time moved slowly as I grabbed onto these somewhat loose cheap nylon straps that were supposed to pass as handles but they were so loose that I ended up gripping onto inner material of the raft as hard as I could and agonizing on the fact that I had to go through another drop, The ride itself was less than a minute long, but it felt so much longer. Once we reached the bottom of the slide, I sat there momentarily stunned at what had just happened, and the rest of my family that was waiting at the end of the slide came up to me unaware of what had just happened and was shocked when they saw me still sitting in the raft, trembling and tears streaming down my face. When I told my family what happened, we informed the lifeguard that was monitoring at the bottom of the slide, and they said they would report the raft I was on and inspect it. I was in shock the rest of the time at the water park and didn't go on any other rides after that either. I told as many people as I could about the lax safety precautions that tried had, and then a month passed and I saw the incident with the death of the boy on the same ride and instantly got chills. It sunk in that I really could have died the same way that poor boy did if I wouldn't have had a death grip on the sides of the raft.